How can the Buffalo Bills offense evolve in 2022? We're going to dive into those possibilities today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Monday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're joining us on the YouTube channel, your first watch every day. I'm excited to dig into the subject matter today, which is how can the Buffalo Bills offense evolve in 2022? And it's a really interesting scenario. It's an interesting question because we really had to wonder last year because the Bills brought back everybody. 21 out of 22 starters. The only one that was different from 2020 to 2021 was Emmanuel Sanders for John Brown at wide receiver. The coaches were the same. The players were the same. And I spent a lot of time on this podcast explaining to you, this is last offseason. I spent a lot of time explaining to you my thoughts about how, despite literally everything being the same year over year, that the Bills could be a different football team. And I had some different angles, and I think we had good conversations and good analysis last offseason. But this offseason, things are going to be different for this Bills team on offense, probably on defense, and even some on special teams. And so for today, I want to focus in on the offense and really highlight several things that are going to be different this year about the offense. And from that, how can we guess, or I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, how can we come up with some ideas as to what this offense could look like? How can it be different than the previous 2 years? Now, let's first acknowledge the previous 2 years for the Buffalo Bills on offense. They've been phenomenal. Probably the best stretch of offensive football year over year for 2 consecutive seasons in franchise history. In 2020 and 2021, the Buffalo Bills had a top 3 total offense and top 5 scoring offense in both seasons. A lot of yards, a lot of points, a lot of first downs, a lot of production. And a lot of the ingredients that were in place over those 2 seasons are still in place, but there are some new elements for this year. I want to focus in on that new stuff and see where we can get as to what this offense can look like, how it can improve, and how it can be different. And I think the first place we have to start is with the coaching, right? That's the most obvious area where this team is going to be different. A major shift when it comes to the offensive coaching staff. And when you talk to analysts of other teams, good analysts of other teams, and their thoughts on the Buffalo Bills in 2022, they're going to tell you that it's a really good football team. They're the Super Bowl favorites. They expect them to win the division and all that stuff. But the question mark that a lot of people have, and I think it's a fair question, is how do the Bills handle the turnover when it comes to the offensive coaching staff? How does Josh Allen look without Brian Dable, who's been his offensive coordinator since 2018? What type of influence on the scheme will Ken Dorsey have and some of the other assistant coaches? And are the Bills going to do things differently? Is the scheme going to look different? Are they going to run the ball more? Are they going to throw the ball less? How does it all work together? And, you know, you think about how good the Bills offense has been over the last 2 years, but it didn't start particularly strong last year, right? This team found its stride late in the season offensively, and that's with all of that continuity that we talked about, right? 4 years of Brian Daboll, and they started slow in year 4 with the same ingredients year over year. I think that caught a lot of us by surprise. And maybe some of that had to do with adjusting to playing in full stadiums and all that stuff. But the Bills' offense started pretty slow in 2021. And considering the way that the schedule unfolds early in the season in 2022, they cannot start slow. They start slow, they're going to be in a hole. So I think that's a big challenge for this team offensively this year, is to start faster, but start faster while you're incorporating new players and new coaches. It's kind of a challenging thing. And you don't have softballs early in your schedule. You're coming out and playing the Super Bowl champions. Then you got to play the number 1 seed in the AFC from the year before. You got the Colts, the Ravens, the Dolphins, the Steelers. I mean, that's a tough early stretch of games. The offense can't take 6 weeks or 7 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks like it was last year to hit its stride. So that's the question that other analysts are asking about the Bills, and it's the question I want to bring up today, or one of the questions I want to bring up today. Ken Dorsey's the offensive coordinator. Dorsey was Josh Allen's number 1 choice to be the new offensive coordinator and replace Brian Daboll. That was very clear. He made that clear openly, and he got what he wanted. And that's a good thing, because I think that relationship, that quarterback offensive coordinator relationship, is a very, very important one. And the fact that they have 3 years of experience together as the quarterback's coach before Dorsey took over as the OC, I think that's going to be helpful for them. And Josh Allen said it this week. He talked about how he already knows. Ken Dorsey already knows what I like, what I don't like. I know what he likes and what he doesn't like. They have the communication. They have the rapport. They know how to talk to each other. So they're ahead of the curve when it comes to onboarding a new offensive coordinator. And I do think it's fair to say that there's going to be plenty of carryover from Brian Daboll's offense in terms of concepts and verbiage. But there promises to be some new elements this year. This is Ken Dorsey's opportunity to be an NFL offensive coordinator and put his full stamp on an offense, one that has Josh Allen as the quarterback. I'm sure Ken Dorsey has a lot of aspirations for where his coaching career can take him, and that next step is for him to be a head coach. Well, what a great spot for him to be in. And so I do expect Ken Dorsey to put his stamp on this offense. One underrated talking point that I've made a few times on the podcast so far this offseason that I want to make again, because I think it's important, and I don't think we're considering this enough. I think everybody understands Ken Dorsey's a first-year offensive coordinator, never been a play caller. And you think to yourself, my goodness, you're going to give this elite NFL offense to a rookie offensive coordinator with Josh Allen in his prime? It's a fair question. But look at how this offensive staff has been assembled around Ken Dorsey. Joe Brady, the quarterback's coach, he comes in with NFL and college coordinator experience. Aaron Kromer, one of the most respected offensive line coaches in the league. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's been an interim head coach. This guy's got a lot of experience in the NFL, coaching offensive line, and obviously that coordinator experience matters. Mike Shula, hired as a senior offensive assistant. He's got NFL offensive coordinator experience. Now, those are 3 coaches that were brought in this year to go with Ken Dorsey, who is the offensive coordinator, and Rob Boris, the Bills tight ends coach. He's been an NFL offensive coordinator. So in addition to Dorsey, you have 4 coaches on your staff that have been offensive coordinators and play callers so far in the NFL, and that's going to be a major asset to Ken Dorsey. So we'll get more specific here in the coming segments. We'll talk about the O-line. I want to talk about tight ends. I want to talk about the running backs. I want to talk about some passing game concepts and yards after catch, those types of things. But first and foremost, it's the coaching element. And I'm optimistic, I'm fascinated, and I'm excited because we champion continuity. I think continuity is generally a good thing. I'm always going to push for continuity. I think it matters and it's helpful. And I think the Bills have done well here to maintain some level of continuity the best they can in a coach in Ken Dorsey that's been with Josh Allen for 3 years, taking over as the offensive coordinator, but also having enough turnover and the right types of turnover where you feel like you've added fresh minds and perspective and ideas to the continuity. And that's what I really love about how this offensive staff has come together. And I'll be honest with you, I think there's some upgrades here. I think Aaron Kromer is going to be and is a notably better offensive line coach than Bobby Johnson. I think Joe Brady, and I'm not saying anything bad about Shea Tierney, but Joe Brady coming in to be this quarterback's coach. Shea Tierney was like the assistant quarterback's coach. Ken Dorsey was the quarterback's coach. Ken Dorsey's now the OC. But give me Dorsey and Brady over Dorsey and Tierney. And Josh has spoken highly of Shea Tierney. But I really like the idea of Joe Brady being this quarterback's coach and how hungry he is as an assistant coach and what he wants to do for his career. All these guys are in great spots. And I think it's going to all work together to maintain the high level of offense that we've enjoyed from this Buffalo Bills football team over the last several seasons into 2022 and beyond. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. All right, so let's move past the coaching piece of this conversation, and I want to talk about the offensive line. Because I think this is going to be the best offensive line the Bills have ever put in front of Josh Allen. I repeat, the offensive line that general manager Brandon Beane has assembled is going to be the best offensive line to date in front of Josh Allen. Deion Dawkins at left tackle coming off of a Pro Bowl season. Mitch Morse at center. He's a stalwart, right? He's been outstanding. And what I love about Mitch Morse is how good of a player he's been in Buffalo despite having a ton of inconsistency at the guard positions next to him year over year. Like at no point since Mitch Morse has been the center for the Buffalo Bills do I think they've done well in terms of surrounding him with good guards and consistent guards. It's been a revolving door of players. So Dawkins and Morse. Spencer Brown at right tackle, who I think has a really, really high ceiling. I mean, this guy is one of the most physically gifted players in the NFL. A rare combination of size, length, and athleticism. And his rookie season was definitely up and down. But those high-level flashes were exciting. And this guy's got a ton of potential, and I'm excited to see him work with Aaron Kromer to unlock all of that potential that exists within Spencer Brown. Then you have Ryan Bates at one of the guard positions who, we all know, like the Bills offense and the Bills offensive line, it was ignited when Ryan Bates became the starting left guard. Like he had a huge impact on last season. And he parlayed that into a 4-year contract with the Buffalo Bills. I mean, this guy barely played up until late last season throughout his entire career. He's played less than 600 snaps for his career, but he played at such a high level late in the season last year that the Bills said, yeah, we want you back. 4 years, $16 million. Come on down. We think you can be an answer for us. I'm excited to see him going into the season as an expected starter with Aaron Kromer as his O-line coach. Oh, by the way, the Bills signed Pro Bowl guard Roger Saffold. from last year, a Pro Bowler, a consistent run blocker, a key reason why the Tennessee Titans have been so good at running the football. And I know that you're probably going to think about Derrick Henry. Well, when Derrick Henry got injured last year, the Titans' rushing attack didn't miss a beat. Didn't matter who was running the football, whether it was Deonta Foreman or Dontrell Hilliard or whoever ran the ball, they were very productive, and that is obviously a signal that that offensive line is very good, and Roger Saffold has been a consistent part of that unit, going back to Derrick Henry's 2,000-yard season right to last year. And he was great for the Rams. Now, he's older, he's had some injury stuff, but this guy is an impact starter. I like that offensive line. And then you think about the depth, right? David Quessenberry, who was an outstanding right tackle for the Titans last year and has played well when he's been available in the NFL. A nice quality, interchangeable tackle guard type player. Greg Manns has been signed to be a center guard combination type player. He's versatile. He's got experience in the league. And then you have some returning players in Tommy Doyle, Cody Ford, Ike Bucker, guys that I think their best football is ahead of all of those players. So I like the starting five. I like the depth. And that's not even getting into Aaron Cromer as this offensive line coach. Look at this guy's resume. Off the charts. Developing talent, maximizing veterans. What he was able to do with the Saints, the Rams, the Bills, right? He was the Bills O-line coach in 2015 and 2016. Bills had the number one rushing offense in the NFL both seasons. Was it because his offensive line was amazing? Well, there were some good players, like Cordy Glenn, Richie Incognito, Eric Wood. But John Miller and Jordan Mills was the right side of that offensive line. That's a terrible right side of the O-line, right? Neither one of those players have done anything consistent since they've left Buffalo. And I would say that Cordy Glenn, Richie Incognito, and Eric Wood, all three of those players had their very best seasons with Cromer as the O-line coach. I'm excited about this Bills offensive line and what it can be with the talent and coaching that is in place. And I think you're going to see this run scheme evolve. We'll talk about running backs in a minute. But I think Aaron Cromer's influence on this run scheme is going to be significant. I think the concepts of this run scheme are going to be better. And I've kind of talked about this several times where I thought the run offense had an identity crisis under Brian Daboll. And I'm a Brian Daboll fan, right? But I find myself to be willing to critique and those types of things regardless of people that I like, right? I think that's what I'm supposed to do in this role. So I'm a big Brian Daboll fan. I'm excited for him with the Giants. Think he earned that job. But I was unimpressed with how he designed the run game. I don't think he had any consistency with the style of runs, right? Sometimes they were a gap team. Sometimes they were a zone team. And you can't be everything until you're something, right? Be something before you can be everything. And I think Brian Daboll had this wonderful idea that this is going to be a multiple run scheme and that they're going to get good box counts because they have Josh Allen and he's a good passer and they're dynamic throwing the football and they'll be multiple and they'll be difficult to defend. Like in your head, that sounds great until you realize that you're not good at doing it. You're not good at executing run plays because you're not anything. You can't be everything, right? Until you're something. So you can't be both a gap scheme and a zone scheme when you're not good at either thing with any level of consistency. And so I think from a design perspective and from an identity perspective, this offensive line is going to be a lot more formidable and effective run blocking. And for the first time, I feel like I can look at this group collectively and say, you know what? There's a clear vision for the types of offensive linemen that they want to have and how they can help this football team and what they're being brought in to do based on the skill sets that they offer. And I've talked about this in the podcast before where I liked a lot of the players the Bills have had on the offensive line in the past, but you have some guys that are more gap blockers, some guys that are more zone blockers. and you just didn't have any consistency. I mean, Darrell Williams, really good football player. I like him a ton. I think he should be somebody starting right guard or right tackle this year. But his game was predicated on power and angles. He didn't have the foot speed or the athleticism or the lateral quickness or the range to do some of the things that the Bills asked him to do. So I'm excited to see Ryan Bates and Roger Saffold as the guards, paired with Mitch Morse, and then Brown and Dawkins as the tackles. I think there's a clear identity with this group in terms of skill sets and the way that I think they're going to be asked to execute. So I'm excited about this offensive line. I do believe that this is the best group from a coaching to personnel perspective that Josh Allen's ever had in front of him. Let's move on to tight ends. I want to talk about these tight ends because I think this is going to be a really fascinating part of this offense. And production from tight ends throughout the course of the Buffalo Bills history, it's really never been a thing, right? The Bills have never really had a standout, consistent, productive tight end. They've had good players. Jay Reamer's a good player. Pete Metzelaars, Keith McKellar, Charles Clay, Scott Chandler. Those are good players. But have they ever had consistent, high-level production from the tight end position? I don't think that's ever happened at any point in the Buffalo Bills history. But Dawson Knox, what that guy did last year was pretty exciting. So you have Dawson Knox returning, who's a young player, just had a breakout season, set all kinds of career highs in catches and yards, touchdowns, reception percentage, drop rate, all of that stuff was the best of his career. He has shown consistent, steady, linear improvement every season in the league so far. And I think he's developed a lot of chemistry and rapport with Josh Allen. And I think Josh Allen trusts him. And so I'm expecting, continued production from Dawson Knox. But now the Bills have O.J. Howard. The Bills haven't had this type of tight end depth. I mean, last year, let's face it, we all seen it happen. After the Panthers game, which I think was like week 12 or something like that, the Bills only played one tight end. They had Tommy Sweeney as a healthy scratch every week. It was Dawson Knox and nothing else. Now they have O.J. Howard behind Dawson Knox. And I'm excited to see what this is going to mean. And even with Dawson Knox's breakout season in 2021, the Bills' tight end production as a team was very, very low. 61 catches last year from tight ends. That was 29th in the NFL. 654 yards receiving among tight ends. That was 25th in the NFL. So the Bills are a bottom-tier team last season when it comes to tight end production, even with the year that Dawson Knox had, right? Probably the best season a Bills tight end has ever had. And we're still talking about one of the worst is not the right word, one of the least productive tight end rooms in the league on one of the best offenses in the NFL. So how can this Bills offense evolve in 2022? Well, the coaching's different. I think the offensive line is going to be really good, but it's also the incorporation of tight ends and getting more production there. O.J. Howard's a good blocker, but just like with Dawson Knox, there's a lot of versatility. These guys can block and run routes from a variety of alignments. You can do a lot with those two players, including more two tight end sets, which weren't really a thing for the Bills last year. And so, on one hand, I'm a little surprised that based on the way the Bills have incorporated tight ends, that they would go out and get an O.J. Howard. But it's definitely a signal that they plan on getting tight ends going more. And this is something I said last week in the podcast. I want to say it again because I think this is a good talking point that people should be interested in. Anytime the Bills do something, I always focus back to the Carolina Panthers from 2011 to 2016 when Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane were there together. Because you have to always remember this when GMs or head coaches get those opportunities, The reason that they get those opportunities is because of what happened in their previous spot. And so naturally, they're going to want to replicate those elements in their new spot, right? That's what made you successful. That's what anybody would do. And so we've seen time and time again, the Bills replicate some of those things that were successful in Carolina from 2011 to 2016. And so that 2011 offense is what I want to go back to. Mike Shula, who's now on the Bills staff, was an assistant coach. I think he was a quarterback's coach there. But that 2011 Panthers offense featured Greg Olsen and Jeremy Shockey, two really good tight ends. And that year, the Panthers tight ends accounted for 85 receptions for 1,008 yards, which is basically what the Bills have received from their tight ends over the last two seasons combined. In 2011 for the Panthers, Olsen and Shockey accounted for 151 targets. 30% of the Panthers' passing attempts went to tight ends. 30%. By comparison, the Bills' tight ends accounted for 13% market share in 2021 and 12% in 2020. Now, I don't know if the Bills will get all the way up to 30% this year, but could it be 20 or 25%? Yes. And I think more tight end usage, more diversity in how they're used, and more players that make an impact, right? We're talking Dawson Knox and O.J. Howard. I think that's going to be a big way that this Bills offense evolves in 2022. I love brownies, but you know what I love more? Brownie batter. Sometimes I eat half the batter just while I'm making brownies. Imagine if you could lick that spatula clean and also get some protein in. Well, you're in luck because Built has a new creation, and this one is better than ever. The Brownie Batter Puff. You heard me right. This puff takes protein bars to a whole new level, and they're available right now on Built.com. Have you guys tried the puffs yet? If you haven't, I'm not sure what you're waiting for. Puffs are a chocolate-covered marshmallow protein bar. That's right, delicious flavored marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate, and they're healthy for you. 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, only 7 grams of sugar is what you'll find in the Brownie Batter Puffs, and they're the perfect pick-me-up on any day. Again, 100% real chocolate on these things, and it's high-quality protein. It's collagen protein, so that means your body will absorb it more efficiently and provide a lot of health benefits. And you got to try these things. Go to Built.com right now. Get the Brownie Batter Puffs. I got a deal for you. Use our promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. I got some more stuff to talk about. I want to talk about speed at running back. Bills' offense has been really good over the last 2 years, but there's also been a lack of production out of running backs, both in the passing game and in the running game. I think there's a lot of factors that contributed to that, including running back talent, the scheme, which we've talked about, and just missing skill sets in the backfield. And more than anything, the missing skill set is that pass catching back with speed. Well, the Bills invested a second-round pick on James Cook, and that's what he is. He's a pass-catching back with speed, right? An explosive athlete, 4.4 speed that runs routes and catches the football like a wide receiver. That's the skill set that's been missing in this backfield. So that's going to impact things in two ways. First of all, the speed to the perimeter, that outside run threat. That's going to force opposing defenses to respect Buffalo's ability to run the football outside the tackles in ways that they didn't have to account for with heavy-footed running backs like Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. I mean, the Bills had to run the ball outside in the past, the last couple of years. The Bills had to do two things. Number one, get Isaiah McKenzie going right on those horizontal jet sweeps, or run quarterback power with Josh Allen, where you are just trying to create additional blockers, right, and outflank the defense and have Josh Allen and his 250-pound athletic frame run behind it. That's how the Bills ran the ball off tackle. But now they got James Cook, who can just do that. And that's gonna hold those linebackers, right? That's going to allow the Bills to be more effective, obviously, first of all, running the ball outside the tackles, but also running the ball inside the tackles. And so you think about late 2021 Devin Singletary and that being the most productive stretch of his career. You go back across the last 6 games of the year, including the playoffs, and Devin Singletary accounted for 541 yards from scrimmage, 9 total touchdowns. So now you got Devin Singletary in a contract, 2 things, right? Contract year and coming off his best stretch of production in what I think is going to be a better designed run scheme behind the best offensive line the Bills have put on the field with Josh Allen as a quarterback with James Cook. And you're probably going to keep, I think they're going to keep Zach Moss over Duke Johnson. And you have 3 skill sets here that are complementary for the first time. Not just really a question of, do they actually dress 3 running backs? Can Zach Moss play special teams? Stuff like that. But even when you just focus in on Singletary and Cook, there's a lot more diversity and complementary skill sets that exist with Josh Allen in the backfield. So that's another big way that the scheme and offense can evolve in 2022. You've got speed at running back. The last thing that I want to talk about, and anybody that's listened to this podcast over the last 2 or 3 years knows what's coming. It's yards after catch. When it comes to the low-hanging fruit as to how the Bills' offense can improve and evolve, more production after the catch stands out in a big way. The Bills had a top 10 passing offense last year, but they were dead last in the NFL with only 4.2 yards after the catch per reception. That's a full yard below the league average at 5.2. So I think there's a lot that goes into that. I've talked about this. A lot of it's the type of routes featured in the Bills' offense. There's not a lot of quick game, not a lot of just get the ball out of Josh Allen's hands quick into the hands of a playmaker and ask him to go make a play, right? Josh Allen is not is always among the slowest in time to throw, right? He doesn't get the ball out quick. So that, I think Josh Allen's ball placement has not been conducive with consistency to allow his targets to stay up and produce with the ball in their hands, right? I think some of this is on Josh, and I'll give you a quote from him in just a moment. And then also skill sets, right? I don't think the Bills have had the most dynamic yards after catch players for Josh Allen to get the ball to. But recently, Josh Allen said after an OTA practice, he talked about this. He talked about the lack of run after catch. And he said it's one of the top priorities for him to improve on in 2022. Let me read you this quote from Josh Allen. I think myself especially making sure I'm on time, making the right reads and giving our guys good enough balls to get some more yards after catch. That's one thing I think on offense. The run after catch wasn't very high last year, but again, that's me putting the ball where it needs to be and allowing our guys to catch it in good position to make sure they have an opportunity to run after the catch. So I've been working on that. That's one of my biggest takeaways this offseason, and I'm just trying to work on ball placement and allowing our receivers to produce after the catch. He gets it. A lot of low-hanging fruit there. I mean, if the Bills can just become league average, that's an extra yard per completion. I mean, what's Josh Allen going to complete like 400 passes next year? It's an additional 400 yards passing. That's like another like outstanding game throwing the football added to your passing offense. 400 additional yards throwing the ball? Sign me up, right? So yards after catch is a big deal. And so, obviously Josh is going to do the work that he needs to get better at this, but I do think it's fair to point out that the Bills do have some better skill sets this year when it comes to yards after catch. James Cook obviously being the headliner there. O.J. Howard, good after the catch in terms of a tight end. Jamison Crowder, I think, has more yards after catch ability than Cole Beasley. And so you think about Cole Beasley, you think about Emmanuel Sanders, they're not here anymore. Those guys received 184 targets from last year's offense. I think Gabe Davis eats up a lot of that. But I think a lot of that goes to Dawson Knox and O.J. Howard and James Cook. And Jamison Crowder. And so now you're putting the football into the hands, or at least giving the opportunity to put the ball into the hands of better players after the catch. Dawson Knox has been one of the top producing players on the team after the catch. More targets for him will mean more yards after catch because he's good at that. And then here's the final point that I want to make here, and this does tie in with yards after catch, and it ties in with some of the stuff we talked about at running back and the missing skill set. The Bills last year, again, top 10 passing offense, top 5 in scoring and total yards. The Bills were among only 7 teams in the NFL last season to receive less than 500 receiving yards from its running backs. That's going to change with James Cook in the mix. That number is going to go up, and that's going to help the yards after the catch per reception at Georgia. James Cook delivered over 10 yards after the catch per reception for his career. So the course is very clear to me and how the Bills can get more post-catch production as an offense. James Cook, more targets for Dawson Knox, O.J. Howard, Jamison Crowder. And then Josh evolving, right? Understanding what he needs to do to be better and allow this to be more consistent. And then just, I think some of the design of the offense under Ken Dorsey and all these other outstanding offensive minds will create more of that opportunity, right? More easy, cheap, free yards. Maybe free is not the right word, but you don't have to get all of your passing output on air yards, right? Sometimes it's nice to throw the ball in a dump down for 2 yards and have a player make somebody miss and get a 10-yard gain with 2 yards of air yards. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Hopefully after this conversation, you have a good understanding of how this offense can evolve and what's different and how that can make the offense different as a unit. Because this isn't like last year where everything's the same. You've got a new coordinator, several new coaches, a completely new backup quarterback situation, a new RB2, a couple new starters on the offensive line, different looking receiver core. Distribution of targets is going to be different. Personnel groupings are going to be different. And I'm excited to see how this all comes together because I think the Bills have a really nice opportunity to be really good on offense in 2022. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Tomorrow, herd mentality. So get the questions in. You can send me a DM on Twitter, Joe at the Draft Network. Or excuse me, my Twitter handle is at the Joe Marino. And you can also send me an email, joe@thedraftnetwork.com. So we got that coming your way tomorrow. Lots of fun stuff coming up this week and this month on the podcast. So many great ideas that I have, so many exciting concepts that I can't wait to deliver. So make sure you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.